Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today to discuss the benefits of applying continuous delivery practices to your IT operations teams. We have a great panel for you here today of people that have walked the walk and can speak to the benefits of their experience. This session will be about 30 minutes, and we will not have any direct Q&A. However, please feel free to ask questions in the conference platform, and we'll respond as quickly as we can. Each of our participants today are customers of our continuous delivery for Puppet Enterprise solution. So you'll hear firsthand how it has helped them streamline their IT operations. Almost all of our largest customers have adopted the solution to help their many internal teams independently deliver Puppet changes while still maintaining safety. If you attended the CD for PE talk, you know that we have some great stuff in the pipeline, so I do encourage you to take a look. With that, let's jump in. My name is Caum. I'm a product manager here at Puppet, working on continuous delivery for Puppet Enterprise. I am working on that solution with Kat Rayburn, and I'm going to hand over to her to introduce herself.
Yeah, my name's Kat Rayburn, and I work on a few different things at Puppet, including leading our design efforts for CD for PE. So let's introduce our panelists. Let's start with Lucas.
Hi, I'm Lucas Crownover. I'm a systems administrator for the University of Oregon. I handle most of the Puppet architecture in our environment, and I'm happy to be here.
And next up on the phone, we have Blake.
Hi, I'm Blake Smreker. I am an infrastructure engineer at Walmart, where I've been for about 5 years.
And our final panelist, also from Puppet, Jessykah.
I'm Jessykah Bird. I work with Puppet as a professional services engineer, and part of the consulting engagements I do across the globe includes installing and training customers on how to use CD for PE.
Great, let's get started. So to begin with, let me start with Lucas. What were you struggling with that led you to adopt CD practices for infrastructure code?
So there are two things that we were struggling with that I think CD for PE covers pretty well. And the first one of those, and probably the most important one, is visibility. In our infrastructure without CD for PE, once we did a push to our Git repository, that deployment process was pretty hands-off and also pretty hidden in the background. And so explaining that to new developers and new Puppet administrators was pretty hard to just say, here's all this backend infrastructure, and I have to, go through the command line, go to a few different servers and tell them everything that's going on. But with CD for PE, it's really easy to say the push triggers a webhook, look in this interface, and all the information is all in this one, web interface. And the other point that we were struggling with, which CD for PE has helped with, is just code validation and making sure that bad changes don't get pushed out. Just being able to simply stop a deployment if there is syntax change or syntax errors has been really valuable for us, because we can all run the PDK module to do validation before we do pushes, but sometimes we forget, and it's nice to not push out syntax errors to production.
So Blake, what about you?
Puppet is well adopted at Walmart. We have over 100,000 nodes under management. We're managing over 128 million resources with Puppet. We were ready to put out more quality code versus quantity. CD for PE has helped us codify our approach to testing infrastructure changes and also provide guardrails developers outside of the internal Puppet team who are deploying Puppet code. Additionally, the lack of CI/CD for infrastructure code was frustrating. No one likes to write tests, and the only tests being run were blanket linting for the module as a whole versus unit testing. Our coverage was pretty low as a result of that. We've been struggling with that for a while.
And Jessykah, what struggles are you seeing customers facing?
So they're seeing things, software delivery, application teams within their environments are deploying code, they're testing it, and they know they want to do something like that with Puppet too. They tend to get tired of having to run it on 10 different nodes manually, all the man hours to check it, and then waiting for validation to approve to production, only to find out that some systems or some edge cases or certain values weren't tested against. So they know that they want to, they know that there's a benefit for it. They just tend to have a problem with figuring out how to get started on it.
Great. So we often see customers struggle to get more teams adopting infrastructure as code practices due to challenges with integrating code they author with the rest of the infrastructure code. Blake, have you seen similar challenges at Walmart? And if so, how did you overcome those issues?
Well, we have some teams that are not as advanced with Puppet or only using Puppet in specific use cases. For example, they may just be adding or deleting data or users without updating the Puppet modules or improving the code base. We haven't explicitly solved this problem yet, but we want to eventually have the server admins and app owners own and contribute to their own relative modules in a more constructive way.
Thanks. So, Lucas, tell us about your organization. As I understand it, you have a lot of internal customers that need to adopt Puppet code for various use cases.
Yeah, so we have a really diverse environment where we have many teams. Some teams are, very basic Puppet usage. Some teams are fully integrated their application stacks with Puppet. So it really just depends on the team. We have many cases where we just provide a stable base at the operating system level, where we have all of our base stuff, and then we just give them the stable base and they can put their application on top. A lot of our database administrators will go that route where they just want to handle their own data, and we just make sure they have access and they can handle everything themselves. But we also have people on the other side of the house, which they'll actually use Puppet for their build process, where they can, ensure a VCS repo has the latest version of their app code, and then that chains to an exec that runs their build process. So in our case, the biggest challenge for us is training various groups as we onboard more groups into using our Puppet infrastructure. And so we just sort of teach them the basic, install a package, then put some config files in place, and then make sure a service is running. And then we gauge, how they feel about that process and see if that's something that they want to dive deeper into. And then we can provide better trainings for them or more trainings for them. Or if they just feel like maybe this is a cool technology and they just want to manage their stacks, and that's fine too.
Thanks. So Jessykah, I'm really curious about your experience. What are you seeing in other customer organizations?
So a lot of administrators they're not really good at Git. They learn just enough to do whatever their daily job requires. And so they don't have a lot of code management expertise, merge conflicts, those sorts of things that you encounter on a daily basis when you're working with large teams. Lots of people are committing code into the same thing. We have the control repo on the Puppet side. So you have 20 administrators all working in the same repository, and often they're overlapping their code because it hasn't been broken out yet. So having a framework that allows them to see how it all will merge together and work together and test, and all the different commits that everybody's committing will still work with each other, is highly beneficial.
So, Lucas and Blake, I know you both are using feature branch pipelines. Blake, can you tell us how you're using them?
Yeah, at Walmart, we use the feature branch workflow to build confidence in the developers. Specifically, our workflow consists of the developers using a feature branch to make changes to Puppet code and merge this branch into unstable and dev environments, respectively, before merging to master and tagging the repository for R10K. Using this workflow, developers have a way to test their changes on pre-production systems in the lower environments before deploying to live systems without fear of creating another war room.
And Lucas, what about you?
Yeah, so I would definitely have to agree with Blake that I think confidence is one of the biggest factors of using feature branch pipelines. Just the confidence in not having to worry about causing catalog compilation issues with any other nodes in the environment, because you can just test against whatever nodes that you feel comfortable testing against. I think that it's also super useful for like our systems team who manage sort of the base Puppet infrastructure, because when we make changes to the control repo, that's going to affect, it may affect nodes across our entire infrastructure. And so it's super useful for me when I'm designing modules to be used across our entire environment, that I can just test what will be affecting many nodes. I can just test that against a couple of test nodes, but it's still in sort of a semi-production environment. So yeah, confidence would definitely be one of the best points of the feature branch workflow.
And Lucas, what was it like before using feature branches versus after?
Well, it was definitely a lot more sort of Wild West. We would have developers that would push changes, maybe developers who didn't have adequate training to be making changes to modules that are used everywhere. So we get catalog compilation errors. It was totally not uncommon for once or twice a week to have some compilation error that was across our entire environment, and maybe we didn't find out about it for a day or so. until one of our developers who was, testing Puppet code said, "Oh, my stuff's not compiling because of this error in syslog or something." But now in the feature branches, we don't really have to worry about that. And it's been really easy to convince our developers to also make use of the feature branches because honestly, the benefits are pretty obvious.
Great. So Jessykah, can you talk about what operational models you're seeing at customers that benefit from impact analysis?
Yeah, so customers that benefit the most, I find, are the ones that have the older, long-lived change management processes where they have, a change management meeting board that might be once a week or once a month. And, it takes a long time for any of their code to actually make it to production. Impact analysis gives them the ability to come prepared to those change advisory meetings. They can get a detailed report of all the nodes that are going to potentially be affected by this proposed change in code.
And Lucas and Blake, do you have similar use cases in your organization? Let's start with you, Lucas.
Yeah, so we recently just started using it in some specific cases. I've shown it off to a few of our more seasoned developers, and I think that they were really excited when in using it with the ability to specifically analyze changes for changes that would affect many nodes. So when they're working on their base profile for their group, something that might affect, a few hundred nodes, they found it super useful that they can run a manual impact analysis, look at that output, make sure that those changes are only affecting the nodes they expect. And then if there are unexpected nodes, they can look into what changes are those going to be, or maybe they can look into nodes they do expect and make sure everything there looks correct. So yeah, we haven't been using it for long, but we're starting to see some benefits there.
Yeah, that sounds great. Blake, what about you?
Unfortunately, we don't have impact analysis in production at Walmart yet. It's pending a security review, but the details of it aren't lost to us. With impact analysis, we hope to add more useful details to our automated changes in ServiceNow in order to provide operations with clear records of changes deployed by Puppet, reducing the time to identify impacted systems and back out the change. For example, our ServiceNow change management team holds post-mortem meetings for war rooms in our area. After one particular war room that was caused by an unvalidated Puppet code deployment, the change management team was introduced to the idea of impact analysis. After having IA explain to them, they are requesting that when we do have CD for PE in production, we add impact analysis details for deployment to our automated changes in ServiceNow that are open for each Puppet code deployment to provide more clarity.
So let's start with Lucas. How has CD for PE affected your ability to find and fix problems? Have you been able to remediate problems any sooner than before you used CD for PE?
Yeah, I think that this ties back to the first question that we asked, that CD for PE really provides a lot of visibility into the build process in the area that wasn't very visible before. One of the really nice workflow changes that CD for PE provides is a lot of our developers don't really know how to use Git that well. They'll know the typical do a pull, make a commit, and push, but they won't know how to look into the logs. They won't know how to look at the actual diff changes. And so CD for PE provides a really nice GUI that they can sort of just go into and click the commit message and look at it in Git. And so our troubleshooting process has really been changed using CD for PE. Before, what we do is, in Puppet Enterprise, you can look through your reports and see, maybe at this time you started having errors. And so from there, for the less seasoned devs with Git, it might be hard to know where to go next. But with CD for PE, it makes it really easy because we can look around that time in the pipeline and see, oh, something deployed this time. And then you have a link to the commit message. You can click it right there. It takes you right to your source control provider. And then you can actually see all the changes that happened. So as far as finding problems, it definitely helps with, making that more accessible to our other teams.
And Blake, what are your thoughts?
Historically, a lot of time has been spent on root cause analysis, but CD for PE has given us greater visibility into changes. Typically, if there was an incident, we'd get in the war room, have to comb through the suspected module's GitHub repository, go to Hydra and the PE console resource list for servers to identify the culprit resource, and then do a pull request to the relevant place to fix it. CD for PE has given us a more user-friendly way of looking into those kinds of things. if CD for PE had been in production at the time, we could have avoided or greatly shortened the length of a worm related to the incident I mentioned in my answer to the last question regarding an unvalidated Puppet code deployment.
And Jessykah, any customer examples that you've seen?
So the first thing I usually do is I always introduce them to the PDK or Puppet Development Kit if they aren't already using it. Just from using that alone, they get a lot of empowerment, visibility, validation, linting, depending on whether they're doing any at all before then. And then once they have that up and going and integrated into CD for PE, they get a lot of visibility from using that and using the jobs that are just built into the box for CD for PE. That way, no matter whether it's the team that's primarily responsible for Puppet or the different application teams or whoever else is providing Puppet code, they all get that confidence that everybody's working off the same baseline in the testing, and the time that they spend adopting PDK and learning just the basics of using it, ensure that everything's validated even before any of the code gets deployed anywhere. And that sort of validation just they find really, really important to trusting other team members that are perhaps more novice or newer to Puppet than the main team that's responsible for it.
Okay, great. I feel like that's a great place to call it. I want to thank all of the panelists for participating. We really, really appreciate it. Now let's take some time to discuss what we just heard from the panelists. Kat, I know that you have some thoughts on some of the topics that we heard. Why don't we dive into those and discuss what other customers are doing?
Yeah, thanks, Carl. So to begin with, as both Lucas and Blake mentioned, one of the core uses of CD for PE is to enable them to expand capabilities to teams of developers that may not be as advanced with Puppet. As someone who has been with Puppet for quite a few years, are you seeing more of this now?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that was pretty common in the early days of Puppet adoption and just automation in general was you would have a single team that would adopt the tool and really own it. They would own all the automation, they would own all the content. But what we're seeing over the last several years is this expansion of automation across an organization. So more teams are becoming expected to adopt automation and really automate the things that they do on a day-to-day basis. It's no longer about the IT operations teams, the core teams that are doing, middleware configurations and defining standard operating environments. It's also the database teams that are responsible for automating how databases are deployed and managed. It is the team that is responsible for managing vendor applications like SAP, and SQL Server, that kind of stuff. We're also seeing a lot of adoption on the application side as automation and standardization of the core infrastructure to support applications becomes more critical to digital transformation initiatives. We're seeing a lot of that being pushed left and be pushed more to the application teams that are actually the experts in what that needs to look like. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of more teams adopt automation, and CD for PE has been foundational for a lot of teams, not just Walmart and University of Oregon, but a lot of other companies are seeing those similar benefits as they use CD for PE to help spread Puppet automation across more teams.
That sounds like a lot to do for a company. What kind of cultural changes are needed in an organization when introducing CD practices for infrastructure to do that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I'm seeing in terms of how culture in IT is shifting. One thing that we're really seeing is there needs to be more tight communication between all of the different stakeholders that are involved in pushing a change out to the infrastructure. We see a lot of companies who have a lot of bureaucracy. They have change advisory boards. They have this very complex and involved change management workflow. And it's very important that you take the CD for PE, ways of working and integrate it into those workflows. And we're going to do more over time to help that. But what we're really seeing is that the speed that is required to really get the benefits of CD practices in the infrastructure are really where the core of the cultural changes need to be. So sure, you have a change advisory board. Sure, you have this complex change request system, or process. But a lot of customers, in order to be successful, really need to shorten that. They need to simplify it. You probably can't get rid of it entirely, but the more you can do to automate away all of the siloed, parts of that process, the slow parts of that process, the better. That's the biggest cultural change that we're really seeing. A lot of companies just want to have more visibility at first, but not want to necessarily move faster. And really, to get the true benefits of all of this, you need to take the process you have and make it faster and faster and faster until hopefully one day you don't really need it anymore because you've pushed quality and communication so far left towards the keyboard, of actually writing that change, that you don't need that complex process anymore.
So speaking of those changes, Lucas talked about how they use feature branches at U of O. Do you see other customers using those?
I do. It's been one of those features that has kind of been a sleeper feature. We knew that it was important when we built it, but what we didn't really anticipate was how popular it would really be. The core benefit of feature branches is that it does push that quality left. If you look at a lot of processes that companies go through today, they have a lot of pre-production environments. So every change has to get promoted and baked, and then promoted and baked and promoted and baked, and different things are flowing through the system at different times. And that you'll never get rid of that entirely. But what the feature branch has allowed you to do is make sure that it's good before you even do the pull request, before you try to merge this into main line. And that shortens dramatically the time that it spends in that main line, the process going through all the pre-production environments. They just don't have to bake as long. You're much more sure of it. And things get backed out less often. You less often have a change that gets to a pre-production environment and go, whoops, that's not what we intended. And then have to back that out, and while everything else is trying to, get pushed through at the same time. That's going to happen, at times. That's unavoidable. But, the more you can reduce it, the better. And that's where feature branches just really shine. It really lets you focus on the change that you're making and make sure that it's good before you even ask, for it to be included in the main code base.
Yeah. And so one of the other killer features in CD for PE is impact analysis. And so an impact analysis report can tell you, before you deploy some code, exactly what nodes are going to see changes and what resources on those nodes are going to change. So how do you see customers using that feature to improve practices within their organization?
Yeah, impact analysis has been a feature that we knew was going to be big when we were building it. And it certainly did not disappoint. A lot of customers are using impact analysis as part of their feature branch workflow. So, before they do that final pull request, they might do a manual impact analysis and say, before I even request that this code be merged into mainline, what's it going to do? When it does get to a pre-production environment, when it does get to production or a mission critical environment like PCI or DMZ, what's going to happen? Having that confidence early on is absolutely critical. You don't want to get surprised when you're rolling something out to production that it affects servers that you weren't anticipating. You don't want to be surprised that a piece of code affects sudoers in a way that you were not expecting. Having that confidence as early as possible in the delivery process of a change is absolutely critical. Now, it's not going to catch everything. It's not a silver bullet, but it does give you that sense of confidence much earlier on that the change that you're about to make is going to have the breadth and depth of scope that you anticipate. A lot of companies are also really interested and are using this in order to kind of manage risk. So if you see a change that's come in through a pull request, and impact analysis is saying this is going to affect the firewall rules on the DMZ servers, that might be okay, but now you know that you need to give it more scrutiny. That's a big change, and you need to be able to understand that change before you go and improve it, right? Before you roll it out. So the other side of that is you may have a change that only affects the applications or services that the team that put in the request owns. It's their thing. They own it. Well, in that case, that's a low risk change, right? Go ahead and push it through. So basically, it allows a lot of companies to understand the risk of a change and push through low risk changes much faster, significantly increasing their velocity, but then applying scrutiny to high risk changes, increasing their safety. So it really ends up being the best of both worlds for a lot of customers.
So one last question from me, and not to be a downer here, but one thing we've seen is that it can take a little bit of time before customers are able to get the benefits of CD for PE and of continuous delivery for infrastructure in general. So what are the elements needed to successfully roll out, like both from a technical standpoint, as well as from an organizational standpoint?
Yeah, so there's two parts to that. From a technical standpoint, CD for PE does require that you change the way that you're managing Puppet today. So if you're a long-time Puppet Enterprise customer, you probably have a way of working. You have a promotion process. You have a way that you manage your environment branches and Git. You have a way that you manage pull requests and handle all of that. CD for PE does have a very prescriptive way that we expect you to work. CD for PE handles all of the Git branching management for you. It handles a lot of the node group management for you and Puppet environment assignments. So it also requires a main branch. So the days of just having a production branch and you promote things from branch to branch to branch are gone. So for customers that have been using Puppet for a while, that's quite a shift for a lot of customers, and it's not a hard shift. The challenge is actually in coordinating when you stop doing things the old way and switching over to the CD for PE way. And that's where I see a lot of customers actually struggle. It's not, understanding a new way of managing Git. It's not understanding the new place that you put your pull requests. It's entirely around how do we coordinate against all, with all of the teams that are contributing to the code base and saying, okay, on this day at this time, you're going to stop doing things the old way and switch over to the CD for PE way. That's a level of project management that, takes some work. So it's really your bureaucracy side of things. So that's actually both technical and organizationally, the organizational challenges. The organizational side is a little bit, you can go a little bit deeper on that. A lot of companies struggle with kind of thinking about things in a high velocity way. A lot of companies want to take exactly what they're doing today, which oftentimes is very slow. It can take weeks, if not months, for a change to go from keyboard to production. And they want to kind of just do that in CD for PE, and CD for PE will do that. Like we can implement it, whatever process you have. We can reflect that in CD for PE, but to really get the benefits of CD for PE, you have to kind of adopt a mindset around valuing velocity and baking safety into the process so that you can move fast without introducing higher risk, without introducing breaking changes constantly or ever. So I think that kind of shift in mindset of we got to move fast and bake safety into the process is a change for a lot of companies that I see them struggling with. Luckily, one of the things that I talk a lot about with CD for PE and just CD practices in general is that when you have a codified process, when you have something that is written down and visible and measurable, that's when you're in a position to be able to continuously improve it. So don't just continuously improve your infrastructure. Don't just continuously improve your Puppet code. Continuously improve the way you work, the way that you actually deliver changes. So step one of that process, from my perspective, is to first just codify what you have. Take the process that you have today and get it into CD for PE, get it into a series of pipelines that does what you do today in a way that you can see and measure. Once you have that in place, then you can start to look at it and say, okay, where do our changes tend to take the longest? Do they tend to bake for weeks on end in this one particular environment? How do we reduce that? How do we increase the throughput of the entire system end to end? You can only do that when you have a pipeline in place. It's actually giving you that visibility and metrics that you need to be able to identify where your biggest bottlenecks of the entire process are, and increase that improve that part of the system so you increase the overall velocity and throughput. That's probably the biggest change that I see companies really struggling to adopt and kind of think through. Luckily, that can take, you can continuously improve over time. So it's definitely not something that I think is insurmountable for customers, So yeah, that's definitely what I see where customers are succeeding and where the challenges are left for customers to, get the most out of CD practices for their infrastructure.
Awesome. Thanks, Carl. And I think that's a wrap for us. Thank you again to our panelists, Lucas Crownover, Blake Smreker, and Jessykah Bird. And thank you, audience, for attending. I hope this discussion gives you an idea of what's possible when you adopt CD practices for your Puppet code. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference.